Hello and welcome to the video tutorials for this year's ornaments. I'm just going to walk through some of the quick basics to start off with, and then if you've already watched this part of the video, you can skip to the actual video of the specific ornament being stitched. If this is your first time watching any of these videos, this is just the beginner's intro, so it's going to be the same for all 4 videos. So the first thing is your kit will come with all of your floss. If you got the kit of 4, you're going to come with these 4. And if you got the 12, you're going to have a bunch that will be used for all 12 designs. Your needle, there should be 2 in your pack. And then all of your designs, pending that you got the full kit. If you just got the wood only, you will have this and your instruction booklet. And that should be everything you need. Just a disclaimer, you can, for finishing the back, I'll be showing the instructions on how to finish the back of these. But it is sort of up to you how you decide. You can leave them blank like this, or you can cut out and trace the felt and glue it to the back to cover, or use another creative option for covering the back. The supplies for this one, you've got your floss, your needle, and your templates. The floss, you're going to follow the floss color guide and apply whichever color to where you want. You can always mix it up and change it however you want. This entire pattern uses 6 strands of floss. The only exception is these little French knots here. You're going to use 3 strands of the red and 3 strands of the white, and I'm going to show you really quickly how to do that actually in the tutorial for the stocking. So you'll see that right in there. Otherwise, a few things to note is when you're taking your floss from your bundle, you're always going to want to pull the floss from the end that has the number. It is designed to not tangle when you pull it out. If you pull the end that is over here, it's going to get into a tangled mess. So that's something to note. And then when you're pulling out your thread, you're going to use about an arm's length of thread. So you'll pull out and then I normally just pull my arm all the way out and then give it a little snip. Whoops, you want to give it as clean of a line as possible so that when you're threading your needle, if you find that you struggle to thread a needle with 6 strands, you can split the floss, which is something we talk about when we're doing our one here. But for this case, if you struggle to thread it with all 6 strands, you can split your floss. One thing to split is just by pulling the ends, all the pieces will separate, and then divide it into 3s. You try to do it as naturally as possible, because when you pull them into the natural way they want to separate, it's easier to pull them out. This guy's gonna get in the way. But you're just gonna pull your thread till it's fully separated. And then this gives you 3 strands of your floss, and you can thread those 3 strands a little bit easier and then tie the ends together. And basically what you're doing is you're doubling up your thread. So by going like this, putting your strands together, you're still going to end up stitching with 6 strands. But you only have to thread 3 through the eye of the needle. So that is helpful if you struggle to thread your needle. And then for tying the end, I typically just do a couple of knots. For the first stitch you'll do on your ornaments, you're gonna wanna do a nice big knot at the end. So since I'm tying 3 strands, I'm actually gonna tie this like quite a few times. Just really make that knot as big as I possibly can, because as you pull this through, so I'm just going to use this as an example. This isn't the correct stitching method, but you're going to want to make that knot big enough so that it doesn't pull through the back. Since these knots are large enough for the needle and the thread to come through, they also means that your knot would pull through on just a regular knot. So you really want to focus on that. If you are stitching with it where there are stitches already created and you're starting a new strand, you don't have to do the larger knot. You can just do a standard knot. And then you just feed your thread underneath of already finished stitches, and then it'll hook onto there, and then you can start stitching in any spot without worrying whether your knot will come through. So that would be the trick for that. And then that's the same for when you're securing your stitches at the end of stitching. Once you've come up from the back and you're ready to finish and tie off this thread, you're just gonna put it through the back of your stitches wrapping it around at least one time until it creates a loop here. You're going to take your needle and go through the loop to create a knot. Typically just one time doing that is enough. If you are worried that it's going to come through, you can do 2, go through underneath the stitches twice and knot it 2 times. But there isn't a lot of wear and tear on these, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about that. And then obviously for threading 6 strands, you're just doing the same thing. You're just taking a full piece. So you can do it either way. You can do it over the method where I showed you, the folded over and tied together end method, or you can use all 6 strands and thread them. Just depends on how comfortable you are threading a needle. These needles are size 24 tapestry needles. These are designed for a size 24 tapestry needle to fit through of a John James needle. So every needle is a little bit different. If you are struggling with getting your needle through on, say, an area where maybe there's more than one stitch through the same hole, you might need to size down on your needle if you are purchasing your own supplies. So that would be for people who have purchased the wood only kit. Sorry, the last thing I was going to show you is if you're wanting to use a different type of knot, you can use just a knot where you've wrapped it around your finger and pulled it through. Or another option is the quilter's knot. So you can take your threaded needle and your end and put them horizontal to each other, lay that thread on top and pinch it with 2 fingers against the needle, wrap the thread a few times, push your needle through the pinched wrapped needle and pull it through, and you should create a knot. So 3 or 4 wraps of that should be enough. Trim your end, and then you can get started stitching. For the most part, that's everything you need to know. Any tips that I tell you on specific stitch will be told during the stitching. And I'm only going to show examples of the stitches once, like on a shirt, so that you don't feel like you might miss something if you don't decide to watch like a whole hour-long video of stitching the entire ornaments. So we will get into it, and we'll start on our first ornament right now. All right, so it's time for our Christmas tree. This is one of my favorite ones on here. So we're going to start with our rope, and then I'll work in an order. I'll tell you right now the order, so if you want to follow it and not follow every tutorial, you can. But basically how I did this one was I started with the rope, did my whipped, then I did, you can do it in 2 orders, but I liked to go by color from there. So I did my rope, whipped it, and then I started with whichever color. So if I did my green next, I did all of my green outline, then did my French knot, then did my lazy daisy, and then I did all of that, and then came back and did red, white, and did them all in that order. So I didn't necessarily do my outline, then do my bulbs, I did them by color instead of by stitch. So we're gonna start with the rope, and then I'm gonna show you the elements, but that would be the order that I would stitch it in if I were you, by color, not by element. So the first stitch that I'm going to show you is the back stitch portion. So you're going to start down here, and I want to start a little bit back from the edge. So if that makes sense, I've got a big knot at the end that I don't want to be able to be seen. So if I start right here and start my back stitch, that knot could be hanging out. So I'm going to start a little further back. I also don't want to start it on the same one that I'm going to be doing a lazy daisy on, because then I have to do a lazy daisy through the knot at the back, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to start it right here, which might seem odd, but it works the best for that reason. Something I've picked up. So I'm just gonna do my back stitch, then I'm gonna flip back to over here and start coming back up over here. So just a simple back stitch. The nice thing about a back stitch when you're doing it on this wood is that you don't always have to skip over to this hole and go back for each one. If you've gone down through a hole, you can actually come back up through the hole as long as you didn't just go down it. Does that make sense? So like this one, I just went down the hole, so I have to go forward and then back. But since I didn't just go through this hole, I can go through it now, and then it just saves you a bit of floss. So It's helpful. There should be enough floss for you to do it either way, but I recommend saving the floss just in case you make a mistake. And then we're just gonna do, you would do this all the way around. So going up, oops, made a knot. So when you're trying to get rid of a knot in your thread, the best thing to do is go through where the knot is to loosen it, because it's not a real knot, it's just a tangle. And then I'm gonna stop pretty quick. I'm just gonna do a last 2, okay. And then if you were say out of floss, I'm not gonna out of floss right now, but we're gonna say that I am, you would tie off by going underneath the stitches, through the loop, oops, and then you're all done. No. So that's nice and secured. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll whip that back stitch to give it that candy cane look. So I've got my 6 strands of white, and for this one, because I already have stitches at the back, I'm not gonna come up through it. I'm gonna secure my knot so that I can pick the spot I want my knot to be. And it's also not the worry that it's gonna come through the holes. So I'm gonna pick over here, and then I'm gonna come up and start over here. Again, I picked a little further in so that my knot doesn't show at the edge. It's just a way of keeping it. And then I'm gonna start wrapping. So just go, so come up and then just immediately go under. And if you're going under, you wanna go under from the same direction each time. So I'm going from the bottom up to the top of the Christmas tree. So I'm going underneath each stitch from the same direction. Okay. Under it and just whipping it around. It does get a little tight when you get to like here. See how I'm gonna have to go under and then kind of lift my thread over, my needle over top of the thread so that I don't clip the next row or row of backstitch. And just go in all the way around. Oops, this one's tight. So I'm gonna go underneath this one, and I'm gonna actually go under both of them in this corner, because the next thing I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to switch directions. So, and then I'm gonna go down. And so in order to try to make that as seamless as possible, I just went around it, and then, oops. Oh, that's not, I didn't, oops. So like I said before, going in the same direction, I'm all tangled up. Okay, now that I've untangled myself. So when I came back down, I went down under the stitches. Like I was talking before, you wanna go in the same direction. So with my whip this time, I'm going down to whip it around. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you each element in the green. You're gonna follow the color guide or whatever colors you're using and work in each color. But for the examples, I'm gonna show you everything in the same green. So the first thing that's probably the simplest is gonna be your back stitch. You're just gonna frame the entire thing in a back stitch. So going down through one hole, up through the next, back down through the last hole. And then, like I was saying earlier, you can actually come up through that hole and down to save floss instead of always jumping like I'm doing right now. So just following this pattern to fill in all of the lines. So that one's pretty simple. I think most of us can handle a back stitch. The next thing we're gonna do is the lazy daisy portion, which you're gonna come up. I'm just gonna choose this one. This one actually is green on the color guide, so this is correct. You're gonna come up through the hole, back down through the same hole, and then you're trying to create a loop, essentially. You wanna create a little loop. Once you get to the loop stage, you can like either loop it around your thumb or just watch. And then you wanna go up through the end hole here, the anchor hole is what I'll call it. And then you're just gonna pull it till it's nice and down so that the tip, when you press down on it with your fingers, so that the tip of the loop is no further out than the hole. You want it to kind of be halfway through that hole. So when you put the anchor stitch in, it doesn't pull it through the hole. It's not laying floppy. It just has the right amount of security. And then an added thing to make it nice and like filled in is I did a top stitch. So what I did was I came back up through the hole after I'd made my lazy daisy, and then I went over top of my anchor and back down through the other hole and stitched on top. And this just created like a filled in little bulb. So it made it look like a bulb, but it also made it look nice and filled in. You don't see the anchor stitch anymore. And I think it worked out really well to create like a little bit of dimension too. Okay, and then the last stitch is your French knot. And I do have a tutorial on troubleshooting French knots if you do end up finding that you're having trouble with it. But basically you're gonna come up from the back of the wood, and you're gonna take your thread and wrap it around your needle about 3 times, I would say is probably the right amount. You're holding it with your fingers and that's called your anchor. You're gonna put the needle back down through, and then with your anchor, you wanna pull that knot so that it's nice and secure, but also that it's down at the surface of the wood. So it's already down where it should be and it's ready. And then you're gonna push or pull this needle through to the back. So it should be like, you can do it really slow. The better you get, you might be able to go faster, but slow and steady is probably the most effective. So coming up from the back, 1, 2, 3, back down through, and then like I said, pulling, if the knot already isn't at the surface of the wood, pulling it down using this little thread. That controls the tension of the wraps. If it feels too tight, you want to let go of that and then kind of give it a couple little mini tugs to loosen the wraps and then pull it down through. If the wraps are too tight, you will find that you won't be able to pull the knot through. And if you do, it's probably going to you're going to pull so hard that it comes all the way through to the back side of the wood. So wrapping 3 times, putting it down. See, I've got my tension here. I can pull my tension so that it's down at the base of the wood, pushing that needle through, and then gently pulling through to create the knot. So if you have any trouble, go to the troubleshooting. It really slows things down. I try to give as many tips as possible, but then you're just going to do everything in your elements. And then if you want to, you can add felt to the back of your wood, or you can just trim it up and leave it on. Adding felt, you just trace out onto your piece of felt and glue on, whether that be hot glue or regular glue, and just tack it onto the back. I suggest making your cutout a little bit smaller so you don't see the edge of the felt. And yeah, so you can finish off the back however you want, or you can just leave it unfinished and get it up on your tree. So there you go, there you have it, all done for the tree. Okay, so for backing our ornaments, you can leave them unfinished, or you can add something like felt or cardboard or something else you want to add to the back. So basically my suggestion for doing this is to trace it out. In past years, I have included the felt, just be careful of your stitches there. I've included the felt, but I've found that a lot of people use their own color, they use other methods. So for this year, we just went with, you guys can use your own creative. So you don't need to actually do the loop there. So I'm just gonna go like that. It's not complicated. You can do it however you'd like. These scissors are not made for cutting, but I would cut on the inside of this line by about 1/8 of an inch. Oops, because we don't want the felt to show from the back, or from the front, sorry. You're supposed to be finishing it the most seamless knot. So then I'm just gonna take that, and you can either hot glue it, or you can glue it with a glue gun, whichever you prefer. I did suggest last year even adding like a little note on the back, or writing 2024, or like Merry Christmas. Just adding like a little message on the back is really nice before gluing them on, depending if it's a gift or not. So there's lots of fun ways that you can make this special, but basically my suggestion is just glue a little felt on the back, and they're all finished. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed making these, and I can't wait to see them. Please tag me on your social media because I would love to see them, or just send me pictures if you want. I love seeing them.